All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're diving into a topic that's both fascinating and often misunderstood.
That's right, we're venturing beyond the world of wild boars, magic potions, and Romans getting tossed around.
You know it. We're talking about the Gauls, but not just the Asterix and Obelix version.
Yeah, we're going deeper than that, peeling back the layers to uncover the real story of this ancient civilization.
And to guide us on this deep dive, we have, as always, Wikipedia.
Exactly. Their page on the Gauls is surprisingly comprehensive, and trust me, there's a lot more to them than funny pages might lead you to believe.
That's what makes these deep dives so exciting. So much to uncover. But let's back up for a sec. For those who might just be tuning in, who were the Gauls?
Well, picture this. Mainland Europe during the Iron Age and Roman period. We're talking roughly 5th century BC to 5th century AD. Now, the Gauls weren't just one homogeneous group, they were a collection of Celtic peoples spread across a vast territory known as Gaul.
Okay, so not a unified empire or anything like that.
No, more like a complex network of tribes, each with their own customs and identities, but connected by language and culture. And their territory. It wasn't some tiny corner of Europe either.
Oh, really? Just how far did their influence stretch?
Imagine a map. What we now know as France. That was their heartland, but it didn't stop there. We're talking Belgium, Switzerland, parts of Germany and Austria, even stretching into the Czech Republic.
Wow, that is a much larger area than most people probably realize.
Right. And it wasn't just about spreading out. They were strategically placed, too. They controlled vital trade routes, particularly along major rivers like the Rhone and the Danube.
Those are like the superhighways of their time, weren't they? Controlling those had to be key to their power.
Exactly. Those rivers were arteries of trade, connecting them to different parts of Europe, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture. It really highlights that they were far from isolated.
Okay, so this image of the Gauls as a bunch of isolated tribes, that's clearly not accurate. They were connected, engaged in trade. Did they have a lot of wealth?
You'd be surprised. Remember those gold mines I mentioned? Hundreds of them just in the Pyrenees, and that's just one area. So yeah, they were sitting on and definitely using some serious wealth.
Okay, so we've established the Gauls were more organized and well off than many might assume. But to understand just how advanced they really were, we need to dig a little deeper into the realm of archaeology.
Now you're talking. And there's one discovery in particular that really throws a wrench into those barbarian stereotypes.
Ooh, I love a good archaeological mystery.
Yeah.
What did they find? Okay, set the scene for us. What did archaeologists dig up that's got us so intrigued?
Picture this. A massive bronze vessel, taller than a person. And I'm not talking about some crudely made thing. This is a work of art, exquisitely detailed. They found it in a Gaulish burial site.
Wow, a burial find, so this must have been something special to them.
It gets even better. This vessel, it's called the Vix Crater, wasn't even made by the Gauls. It was a Greek piece, most likely from southern Italy.
Wait, so they had Greek artifacts in their tombs. Were these things looted, or is there more to the story?
That's the thing. Evidence suggests it wasn't looted treasure. They seem to have imported it, part of a vast trade network spanning continents.
So we're talking about a culture that not only appreciated fine craftsmanship from other civilizations, but also had the means to acquire it.
Exactly. This wasn't just some random acquisition either, this crater. It would have held hundreds of gallons of wine. That tells us something about their lifestyle, their feasts, the importance they placed on social gatherings.
Okay, I'm getting a very different picture of the Gauls now. They weren't just huddled in their villages. These were people with connections, with an eye for luxury, engaging with the wider world.
Right. And to manage that level of trade, of cultural exchange, requires serious organization. Which brings us to another point that might surprise you. Their settlements. We're not just talking about small villages here.
Oh, they had something more than just villages.
They built these things called oppida, essentially fortified towns strategically placed across their territory.
Fortified towns. Now that sounds more like something out of medieval times.
Yeah.
Not what we typically associate with the Gauls.
Exactly. But these were impressive feats of engineering, some housing tens of thousands of people. They were meticulously planned, too, pointing to a good understanding of logistics, resource management, social organization.
Wow, I had no idea. Cities, sophisticated trade networks, fine Greek wine, not exactly the image most people conjure up when they hear the word Gaul.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder who was calling the shots in this society.
Well, it was a fascinating mix. You had the Druids, naturally, holding spiritual and legal authority.
Right, the Druids. Always a crowd pleaser, shrouded in mystery, but they weren't the only ones in charge, were they?
Oh, no, not at all. By the time the Romans came knocking, many Gallic tribes had transitioned to a system of elected officials. Like the Aedui, one of the most powerful tribes, they had a leader called the Vergobret.
Vergobret. Sounds kind of intimidating.
It does, doesn't it? And the position held real power, similar to a king. But here's the catch. The Vergobret wasn't some hereditary ruler born into the role. He was elected, chosen by a council of tribal representatives.
An elected leader. That's amazing. Did they have a system for keeping this Vergobret in check?
They did, this council that put him in power. They could also remove him if they decided he wasn't doing a good job. Talk about accountability, right?
Wow. Elected officials. Systems of checks and balances. It sounds almost, dare I say, democratic. Not exactly what I pictured for ancient Gaul.
It does challenge our assumptions, doesn't it? And it gets even more intriguing when you consider how these individual tribes, these pagi, interacted on a larger scale. They formed these supergroups, alliances called civitates.
Okay, so pagi are the individual tribes, and civitates are like what leagues of tribes. What was the purpose of these larger groupings?
Often it was about mutual defense, banding together against common threats. But it was also a way to tackle larger issues that affected the entire region. Think trade agreements, disputes over resources, things like that. And you know what's really fascinating? These ancient alliances actually influenced the way France is divided up today into departments.
Wow, the echoes of ancient Gaul still shaping the map of France today. It's quite a legacy. But speaking of legacies, we've got to talk about one of the most intriguing and maybe even unsettling aspects of Gaulish culture, their religious beliefs. We've touched on the Druids, but the Wikipedia article dives into some practices that are, well, a little different from your average offering to the harvest gods.
You're talking about the head cult, aren't you?
Yeah, that's the one. Severed heads, preserved and displayed. It's not exactly something you see every day, even in the ancient world. So what's the story there? Why do they do it?
Yeah.
It's one thing to read about it in a textbook, but it's hard to wrap your head around, so to speak.
I know, right? It definitely gets your attention. And it wasn't just random violence either. We're talking about careful preservation, sometimes even embalming these heads, then they display them prominently.
Okay, so clearly not just some forgotten battlefield practice. There had to be a reason, a belief system behind it. What did archaeologists and historians make of it all?
It's still a bit of a mystery, but there are some theories. One idea is that it was a way of honoring fallen enemies. Maybe they believed some essence, some power resided in the head and could be harnessed.
A way to tap into the strength of your enemies. That's one way to look at it, I guess.
Exactly. Or it could have been a form of ancestor worship, connecting with the spirits of past warriors. And of course, you can't rule out the intimidation factor. Imagine stumbling upon a display of preserved heads.
Yeah, talk about sending a message. Don't mess with us. It's also, well, alien to our modern sensibilities.
It is, isn't it? But that's what makes studying ancient culture so fascinating. It challenges us to broaden our perspectives, to understand that what seems bizarre or even abhorrent to us might have held deep cultural or religious significance to them.
Well said. It's a good reminder that history isn't some simple story. It's messy and complicated and full of contradictions. And speaking of complicated, we can't talk about the Gauls without addressing the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the Roman legions in the village.
The Roman conquest. It's a defining moment in their history, but definitely not the end of their story.
That's right, because even under Roman rule, the Gauls didn't just disappear, did they?
Not at all. They were a resilient bunch. What emerged was this fascinating blend of cultures. The Wikipedia article calls it a Gallo-Roman culture. Roman and Gaulish traditions merging, creating something new.
Okay, so not a complete cultural wipeout, more like a blending. What were some of the most striking examples of this fusion?
We see it in their architecture, their religious practices, even their language. Latin became the language of official business, but Gaulish, it didn't just vanish, it influenced the development of Vulgar Latin, which eventually gave rise to the French we know today.
Wow, so traces of the Gaulish language still alive in French today.
Yeah.
You never know, we might be using Gaulish words without even realizing it.
You might be right. It's like a linguistic echo reverberating through the centuries. But it's not just about individual words. This fusion, this resilience, it speaks to a larger theme of cultural survival, of adapting and evolving in the face of immense change.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the face of empires, culture finds a way to persevere. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of the Gauls, let's consider this. What is their legacy? They left behind impressive cities, engaged in sophisticated trade, had a complex social structure, and then, of course, there are those heads. It's a lot to process.
It is, and their story, like any good history, is full of surprises. They weren't just valiant warriors resisting Caesar or simple barbarians with strange habits. They were a vibrant people who left an indelible mark on the tapestry of European history.
Absolutely. So the next time you encounter the Gauls, whether it's in a history book, a museum exhibit, or even a comic book, remember that their story is far richer and more complex than you might imagine. And if you really want to get a sense of who they were, delve into their world beyond the stereotypes and the simplified narratives. Because the real Gauls, I think you'll agree, are far more fascinating than any fiction.